Welcome back to another coronavirus journal. It's been a little while.
This journal is getting quite thick.
It is.
It's almost a novel.
That's true.
With some of the finest information ever shared about the pandemic and everything that came out of this year.
So true. Shared by two idiots who don't know what they're talking about. You know, when we started doing this, one, we were trapped inside here in Puerto Rico. We legally were not even supposed to go outside to walk around. And we were bored. But on the other hand, we knew that this was a historical event and that one day, maybe it would be a long time from now, one day we'd want to look back and watch some of these videos and go like, what were we thinking? What was it really like back then?
Yeah.
Where, you know, everybody's got predictions on what's happening. Were we right, wrong? Were the experts right or wrong? I have found myself already wanting to go back and find clips from previous videos, but we've made so many that I don't know where to find the footage that I'm looking for.
And you're not even saying scrubbing through 3 hours of footage. You're just saying going back to all the folders that we made for each day and just trying to find the news clips?
No, like basically when we were towards the beginning of this, we were making predictions. And I thought, it'd be fun to like find that.
Right.
But I don't know what episode that is, and I don't know what time in the 2 hour window we actually did that. And so I feel like one day I really think I will watch this again, but I might be in a nursing home or something and I might not have anything else to do and I'm just gonna like binge it. I'm gonna go all the way from start to finish.
That is if YouTube is still a thing.
Oh, that's a good point.
And also, maybe we'll talk about this in the show, that is if YouTube allows our videos to stay on their platform forever.
That's a good point.
So there's a lot of questions we will have, but in the meantime, we're filming good content for you people out there. So,
what do you think has been going on since the last update overall?
Our update?
Not necessarily for us, but just in the world, this coronavirus.
It sure
pandemic.
feels. I don't know, man. It's so crazy. Like I don't watch that much news, but when I do flip on the news, it's never really what I expect. Like here in America, it's all about Trump, 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 Trump. And there's a lot of crazy stuff. It sounds like Europe's shutting down. France is at like their highest terrorist alert because they've had all these decapitations and stuff. Haven't heard of any of that on our news. I mean, maybe somewhere on the nightly news they'll mention it, but it's sure not a talking point anywhere. You know, we just had a bunch of the GDP and a bunch of new the stimulus is definitely not happening. We had the Supreme Court justice nominated. Like, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened politically. Yeah. But I don't know. It feels like, as you titled this, a second wave is already here.
Yeah, and it is weird because when you turn on the news, you know, a few months ago, you could not get away from the virus. And now everything's about the election. And so they're not covering the virus as much, not nearly as much. But when you look at these numbers, the second wave is definitely beginning. And we have way more cases. I guess we can just show some of these numbers here. Let's look at like all the numbers first of all. 1.2 million deaths worldwide here. I mean, check out these. This is the daily new cases just spiking up. This is worldwide here. Now, you could argue that we also are doing more testing than ever before as well. So this probably isn't very accurate. But check this out. The daily deaths, I mean, soon we're going to hit a record. I mean, the largest day we ever had, what was that, 8,500, and we're at 7,500 deaths a day worldwide right now. The United States, we ourselves are getting 1,000 of that every single day.
What was the number again? 7,000 deaths?
7,500, and 1,000 of that is from the U.S. So let's look at the United States. 236,000 deaths, and then if we scroll down here, I mean, daily new cases again, skyrocketing more than ever before. Again, this is a little bit misleading because we're doing more tests than ever before.
That's the number the media likes to talk about, though.
Oh, I know.
It's always new cases. It's never any of the other analytics that...
I feel like that's misleading, and I don't like the way they do that. I just wish they would tell the whole story. But here are the deaths, and you can definitely see we are starting to go up here. So this is the 7-day average. It's certainly not a huge spike yet, but it's coming. And when we look at some of these other countries, the stats are crazy in some of these other countries. And I've got some videos. A bunch of European countries are shutting back down. I mean, look at the daily cases from France. They had 0 or almost 0, like hundreds of cases per day. And now they're at 50,000 new cases per day just in France. That's insane.
Well, what's wild is I remember France at the top of that graph when it was a blip. And everyone was freaking out. France was like the 3rd or 4th country. You had Italy. I think you had Spain.
Yep.
And then I think you had France, and they all started shutting down. And as you saw in that graph you just passed, the blip was so small compared to what it is now.
So just a few months ago, France had a few days with 0 deaths. And they're still low, but I mean 500 deaths just yesterday. In comparison to what they were at, 1,500, they're still low, but I think this is a trailing number. First you see the cases spike, then you see the hospitalization spike, then you see the death spike weeks later. Spain's really bad as well. I mean, look at these charts, it's crazy. But again, very similar in the sense that the deaths are still much higher back in March and April, which makes you think that there were way more cases than this back then. They just didn't have the testing to know.
I wish worldometers would have more graphs at this point. Like, I would like to see the graph of like cases per 1,000 or cases per million as time went on, if you had like a way to measure that and see, are we seeing there's just exponentially more cases being done today than there were in March? We know tests. We know that there's more tests being done today, but graphically you don't quite know.
Yeah, I've actually seen that chart somewhere, but not on this website. Italy is starting to shut back down again. Not a total shutdown, but I mean, look at this spike. It's crazy. And their deaths, a little bump. Looks very similar to other European countries. And the UK, we'll play a video. UK is doing a pretty serious lockdown. They're telling people not to go outside unless you have to like get food, go to school, or go to work if you have
an essential job.
Yeah, essential job. I mean, again, their cases are crazy. One other stat while we're looking at stats that we can talk about. I think a lot of people are skeptical of this virus and the numbers and everything. We heard stuff for months that like hospitals got paid way more money if they had COVID patients, and even more if they put them on ventilators. So they were doing that when they maybe didn't need to. So a lot of people, especially on the conservative side in America, took that information, which was sketchy, and have used it to kind of say like, well, all the numbers are bull, and the virus isn't even real, and you don't even have to worry about it at all, and you can't trust these numbers. They told us we can't trust these numbers, and I agree. That was sketchy. Like, everyone on both sides of the aisle agreed.
One number, I don't know what you're about to show me, but one number that I'm hearing people talk about now is the number of influenza deaths. That influenza might have had a historically low death count this year.
It did.
Compared to, I say historically, but like in the last 10 years or so.
We are just now entering flu season.
Did I hear you went out and got a flu shot?
I did.
Yeah? Look at you being responsible.
I mean, Katie is pregnant, and so her doctor told her to. Yeah. Maybe it's important for
But you don't normally get a flu shot?
Never.
Yeah.
I would. I'm not against it. It's just like, seems like a pain in the butt. Until I catch the flu, and then
I hear, are flu shots like totally free now?
We paid.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
My sister was telling me she just got a flu shot and it was free. And I think I had a flu shot a couple weeks ago when I was in South Carolina. I think it was free too. I don't know if my health insurance covered it or everyone's covering it because the government and The United States is trying to say, hey, we can't have a flu epidemic while a pandemic is going on. Like, if that's a health...
Well, I just saw some article. I'm going to get back to what I was talking about, but I just saw some article that said, like, for the first time, somebody has been admitted to a hospital in the United States who has both the flu and COVID-19 at the same time. And I've always wondered, is this really common, but people just aren't testing for the flu? When you have COVID, they're like, that's what he has, and they just don't need to keep testing?
Yeah.
Or is it really rare to get both? I'm not sure. But anyway, as I was saying, a lot of people are skeptical of these numbers, and even, like, you can look at the cases, you can be like, this is bull. Who cares how many cases there are if 90% of the people who have it are asymptomatic? It looks scary, but it's not dangerous at all. And then you can say, well, look at the deaths. Well, the deaths aren't real because we know the hospitals are incentivized to lie on the death certificate, or you die of a car wreck, but then they test you and you had COVID, and so we'll put it down as a COVID death. But the number that you cannot fake is the excess death number per year per country. So each country can look at the previous year's deaths for all reasons, and then
you can compute our
new population.
Yeah, is car deaths down from the historic level? Are heart attacks down from the historic level?
Right.
And then you might be able to contribute some of that to, is this being under or overreported for each category?
So you can go and see this for all the different countries. I'm currently looking at the United States here. This is on the CDC's website. And you can see that it says, as of October 15th, they believe that 198,000 people had died due to COVID. Now, we just looked at the numbers, and I think it's like 230, but this website's a little bit behind. Like, they wait for death certificates to come in and stuff. But
it says as of October 15th.
Oh, and this says through October 3rd.
Yeah.
But from October 3rd, January 1st to October 3rd, we've had 299,000 more deaths than we expected looking at last year's statistics. And you can see this chart here. So the average expected number is this flat line here. Above that is the upper bound threshold. Like, so there's going to be little spikes and stuff every now and again, but it should never pass the dotted line.
So back in February, we were actually below
the
number of deaths.
We're below a little bit. And you can see the dark blue is all causes except for COVID. And you can see that even in March and then back in July and August, we have had more deaths that are not attributed to COVID.
What do you think that is? Like suicide and like
it could
anxiety, like heart attacks or something that was caused by...
we've heard so many stories about people who need to have treatments, but they're afraid to go to hospitals, and so they die in their homes because they're too afraid to catch COVID in a hospital.
Yeah.
It could also be people who do have COVID and died of COVID, but they were never tested. And then you can see the light blue are all causes. So I think I may have got that backwards, what I was just talking about. So this is all causes up here, including COVID, and the dark blue is all causes excluding COVID. So
is there, like, I'm trying to make sense of this graph. We're at 60,000 typically. But now with COVID, does that bump it up to like 70 or 80,000? And then what percentage up are we? Are we just up 5 or 10% more deaths on this year than normal?
Yeah, I don't know. And when it says like number of deaths, what is this 60,000? Is this per day?
I mean, it seems like that would be, yeah, I guess it would have to be per day.
I don't know. But anyway,
all I'm trying to say is when I look at that graph, if COVID was really this awful, awful disease, you might expect that the number of deaths has doubled. Like, we are losing as many people from COVID as from all other things combined. But it seems like we're just...
Oh, that's...
We're just losing like 5% more. Or, some number.
Yeah, I don't
know. Maybe you can look at that and say, that is awful. Or you could look at it and say, well, it's really not that many more people are dying in the big scheme of things. Like when you say, does this sound really insensitive? When you say like 200,000 people die of COVID out of 333 million, I mean, is that a big or a small number? It's a big number when no one's ever died of COVID. And it's a big number when you look at other countries and look at their percentages. Maybe a lot less. Like, doesn't America make up like 25% of all deaths from COVID?
No, I think I guess we're close.
I thought it was something like that.
We're 230,000 versus 1.2 million worldwide.
Because I've seen a lot of people in the news making this argument of the United States makes up 5% of the world's population. That may be wrong, 5, 10%, some number. But we make up 25% of all the deaths from COVID. And I meant to record this. I was watching a clip of Bill Maher, who was on Jimmy Kimmel recently. And he was saying, he was kind of talking down the virus. And, he's super liberal, right?
Yeah, he has always talked it down.
He was kind of just saying, like, what we should be telling people is not to lock up. He was like anti-lockdown. We shouldn't be telling people to stay at home and locking everything down. That's batshit crazy. Instead, what we should be telling people to do is go to the gym, go work out, lose weight, you fat, like he was upset with the state of health for most Americans. And I was like, you know what, like a lot of the stuff Bill Maher was saying was exactly what I know I was saying, probably what you were saying. Why don't we lock down the people that are 65 and older and tell them, you know what, you guys really should stay at home. I know that seems unfair and it's like discriminatory based on age, but like you guys stay home. Let's let everyone that's healthy go out, maybe even get it, and keep the economy going. Chances are 99.9% of you are not going to die from this. And then maybe we could get to herd immunity. I know that's still kind of a controversial topic, if that's even possible. But what we did was we locked down everybody, and then we opened the gates back up, and then all of these obese people in America that are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are still getting COVID and dying, when if they would take care of themselves a little bit better, maybe they could reduce some of the pre-existing conditions.
I just wonder how true that is. Obviously we do know that if you have pre-existing conditions, you have a much higher chance of dying. But like, let's just say that it was obesity, right? And Bill Maher's suggestion is, okay, all you fatties, go to the gym in the middle of a pandemic and lose the fat so that when you catch it, you're not going to die. But when you're at the gym, you're going to catch it more. I know he's partly joking, but
I don't know that he was joking. Like, he didn't say, he was kind of very somber and serious on the show. But maybe that's why America has such a large percentage of people dying. Like, I keep watching the news and the stats and hearing what some of our viewers are saying. When we first started the journal, we were doing Skype calls or Zoom calls with people from other countries. And it just feels like what America's doing doesn't really seem that different than what many other countries are doing. Many other countries, they're out protesting and saying, you can't lock us up. And people are taking a very conservative and liberal side, regardless of where their country falls. And it just seems like in America, everyone is like, look at what Donald Trump has done. And I agree, Donald Trump has not been consistent, and he hasn't risen like a leader should and said, this is what we're doing. Maybe you could make the argument that the left would never let him do that either. But I look at what the people have done, and I think we're smart enough to make our own decisions, right? I don't need a president to tell me what I am capable of doing myself.
But it certainly makes you feel better if you feel like somebody smarter than me, with more power than me, has a plan.
Yeah.
And if we all join together with this plan, we can do this. And Trump never really had a plan.
No, but all I'm trying to say is I feel like Americans have kind of done what they want to do, just like many other countries have too. So I have a hard time at this stage looking at us and saying, we made huge mistakes as Americans. And then you have to say, well, then why are our numbers, if I'm going to make that claim, why are our numbers worse? Maybe it's just because we are one of the most unhealthy populations in the world. I mean, when Italy got hit, is there still a debate on why Italy died? It was like the age, they were a higher age group. They weren't the oldest. I think Japan is one of the oldest populations.
Yeah, who has like no deaths.
But they were they were in the higher range. But then there's also a lot of smokers in Italy. There's also a lot of families that culturally they live in the same house. Like there's a few things that you might be able to contribute to it. But like in America, we're spread out geographically, but maybe we're just not healthy. And that's the reason why we're faring so bad. And then you almost have to say from a health standpoint, is it the fault of the last several administrations that our government, I mean, I don't know if you want to say our government's responsible for this, but should our government have done things the last 20, 30, 40 years to try to get Americans to be more healthy?
That's a tough one. I was very against when New York was banning the large Coca-Colas. I'm like, that is not the place of the government. Leave fatties alone. Let people be fat if they want to be fat. But if we're going to get to the point where we have universal health care and everybody's paying for everybody's health care, then like, I don't want to pay for your
smoking
liposuction.
Yeah, if you're eating 3,000 calories a day and then smoking cigarettes and doing heroin, I'm like, I don't want to be paying
3,000 calories is probably what I'm eating right now.
Well, then I'm not going to be paying for your health insurance.
I got to lose a couple pounds. Let's get to these super chats real quick, then we can get to some videos. Tristan says, when Coronavirus Journal started, Patrick was bald and Lee had hair. So true. It has been a while.
You didn't have hair when the Coronavirus Journal started.
No. Angel says, congrats on going to be a dad. I knew it when you said she was throwing up. I guessed it was morning sickness. Is this the official announcement, or did I miss that? I mentioned it on some other live video, and Katie was mad at me.
Oh, really?
She was like, I didn't want it to be public. And I'm like, you can't hide it anymore.
Yeah.
So, no. I don't know.
She's not going to be happy tonight then.
Well, the deed has been done. So, thank you for the congratulations. Yeah, I'm excited. And I just felt the baby for the first time 2 days ago.
A kick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I could watch her stomach and just little like, it's so crazy. It was always weird when I watched videos, and I've seen other pregnant girls, but when it's my wife and my baby and I see that thing moving around, it's really weird. In a good way.
One thing before you go to the first video, go to where the videos are, the folder, and click on the one JPEG that I made, because this was something I've been curious about, and I just threw this together really quickly. These are the two graphs we just showed, but I've offset them by about 2 weeks, and it's nice to look at them at the same time. And
what do you mean you offset them by 2 weeks?
You know, it's usually like the deaths happen 2 to 3 weeks after the infection rate increases. People who get diagnosed with coronavirus will die 3 to 4 weeks later.
Okay. So
they don't always line up. But when I tried to line these up and I was like, oh, there should be a great correlation of all the slopes and, you know, the changes in cases, I'm looking at these two graphs and it's like, well, the second wave that happened in July.
What are you talking about, you lining these up? I mean, when I look at October 24th here and October 24th here, they look like they're exactly the same.
Maybe it got nudged a little bit more or a little less than what I wanted. I moved the bottom graph to the left a little bit more.
Okay, you just barely moved it.
I mean, it's a lot. It's a large graph, so I felt like I couldn't move it too much. But it just shows how poor our cases are, or it shows no correlation at all. I mean, when we got to June, we have a huge spike in new cases, and you would think we would have the most, according to the top graph, the most amount of deaths would happen in the second stage of, it's not a second wave, but look at the second wave on the bottom. There's way less deaths than the first one. So a lot of people are looking at the top graph and saying, look at October 15th, like we are going up to the largest number of cases ever.
Yep.
We are about to experience the most amount of deaths ever. We're going to have this
I don't know if that's true.
Dark winter.
Yeah.
But when I look at the bottom graph, I'm like, there's a lot going on here. You can't just like say one thing, because it could be we are testing way more. But we could also just have been treating people really poorly back in April, putting them on ventilators, putting them on their stomach, like having the hospitals overloaded, people freaking out. Like, I don't know. No one's taking vitamin D and zinc. We had different treatments. We weren't doing anything right back then. But perhaps, maybe as we go on and get into December, maybe if you look at the daily deaths, maybe there'll be a hump again, but it'll be lower than the first hump.
I think that's true. But my fear is that it will be fewer deaths per day, but it will be a longer hump. So more deaths overall.
So it's just a slow bleed out.
Because remember, that first big hump that we had was all New York and New Jersey. It was barely any deaths in any other state or city even. It was just New York City. All right, well, let's watch a few videos here. Here's the current situation in the United States.
Morning, the U.S. setting yet another sobering single-day record. More than 98,000 coronavirus cases confirmed just Friday.
We're facing a surge in the midst of people telling us that we shouldn't be afraid of COVID.
Swing states, often in the spotlight on Election Day, are now making headlines as hotspots. In Wisconsin Friday, daily COVID cases passed the 5,000 mark for the second time. Currently, 35 states and territories are above the recommended positivity rate for reopening.
People are dying. Period.
Triggering rollbacks in places like Chicago, where officials have banned indoor dining at bars and restaurants, forcing businesses to expand outdoor seating.
Do you think it's fair that businesses are having to go through this again?
Not fair, no. Not fair. We hope not. I know nothing we can do, but we're trying. Because safety comes first for sure.
In Texas, the El Paso County judge ordered a 2-week shutdown of non-essential businesses, saying he was left with no choice.
Our hospitals are at capacity. Our medical professionals are overwhelmed, and if we don't respond, we will see unprecedented levels of deaths.
With infections spreading faster than the beginning of the crisis, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals paused testing on its experimental antibody drug to investigate a possible safety issue. And on this Halloween weekend, growing fears over superspreader events. Airbnb is cracking down on potential parties in Florida by prohibiting one-night reservations and warning the company may take legal action against guests breaking the rules.
You get the idea.
Doesn't sound good.
No, things are not good in the United States, but I don't know if they're worse in other countries or just other countries take it a lot more seriously than we do. But Europe is pretty bad.
In every one of Europe's major nations, it's the same story. Daily deaths are rising frighteningly fast, 40% in a week. Infections in France quadrupling since early September. More than 33,000 new cases on Tuesday alone. German infection rates lower, but approaching their April peak. Spain even higher, but like most nations, its numbers of deaths are still low. Even Italy, suffering so many fatalities the first time around. Almost 25,000 infections in 24 hours, while 205 people died. In the Czech Republic, they've recorded the second highest per capita death rate in the world. Some of Belgium's doctors say they have been told to keep working, even if they have the coronavirus. While Russian officials admit that in 16 regions, healthcare beds are at 90% capacity. We must monitor the situation, says President Putin. Reports in some parts of Russia say the sick are being turned away from overwhelmed hospitals.
My goodness, dear. So these alarming trends.
So that was kind of Europe overall. Then I've got some clips from individual countries as well.
The nightmare has returned. Record numbers of cases every day. It's a 4-hour wait for a COVID test at this centre.
Here, where Italy's second wave is hitting hardest, the testing system is buckling and hospitals are once again being overwhelmed.
Italy relaxed rules and opened up in the summer. As people mixed, COVID cases rose. Now they're exploding.
I have to be realistic, and the next weeks will be terrible, I imagine.
They will be terrible. You know that?
Yeah.
Last night, bars and restaurants were forced to close early across Italy. Police fired tear gas as crowds protested curfews and tough new rules. Already, mask wearing in public is the law, and everyone in this city obeys. Because Bergamo was the epicenter of Italy's first wave.
In this small town, more than 6,000 people died with COVID in just over a month in the spring. The worst death rate in the world. Today, as the virus sweeps in again, people here are terrified.
It's a nightmare we are still living in, so we can't wake up from it. We are scared of go outside home. We are scared to meet other people.
Nearly everyone here lost close relatives.
Two parents,
4 days. In 4 days in March. It's a very terrible year.
They fear another terrible death toll.
The people who will die will be a lot.
What have you been hearing about the vaccines?
I mean, Trump said that we are weeks away.
Weeks away.
And somebody pointed out that there are 52 weeks in a year. And I think they said 36 weeks in a year as a joke. But yeah, we are weeks away. I have said from the beginning of this show, maybe not the beginning, but maybe a month in, the more research I did, it felt like I'm convinced there's no vaccine coming. The vaccine's coming in years from now, or maybe after this is over with. I'm not so confident that there could be a vaccine that will prevent the virus, but it may not be suitable for humans. Like, we're pushing things through at such an alarming rate that there could be complications of virus from antiviral medicines that, I don't know. I'm not betting on that one bit.
So one of my buddies here in the neighborhood, his brother lives in Dubai, and his brother has been given the one of the Chinese vaccines, and he feels fine, and I think he's immune now. So there are working vaccines.
Are we hearing anything outside of the major U.S. companies? Moderna, Johnson & Johnson.
I've just heard that, China's working on 12 and we're working on 3 and Russia's working on 4 and blah, blah, blah. But I haven't heard details like that. And it's interesting to know someone who's related to someone who has taken it and he's fine, which is good news. So I don't know. I've always thought, and maybe this is naive of me, but I've always thought that if there was ever truly an emergency, like global warming or something, where all of a sudden the oceans started rising and people's homes are getting swept away, and all scientists and all money is just pointed towards this one problem, it seems like humans would be able to figure out a way. Like, if we knew an asteroid was coming, we could speed up Elon Musk's Mars trip, and we got to get out of here in 6 months, and let's do it.
Is there an asteroid that has like a 0.001% chance of hitting Earth on election day?
Oh, really?
I read this like a month or so ago. I don't know if it's still even a possibility. But
okay, yeah, I don't know about that. There's probably one every day that has a chance of hitting.
I also read about some asteroid that was like the size of Massachusetts. It's like nickel and copper.
Okay.
It's worth, I don't even know the number. It's like worth 14, whatever is beyond $1 trillion, maybe even it's like 20 times more than the GDP of the entire world.
Okay.
And it's this massive asteroid out there that they think it's like 3 times the distance of the sun.
Okay.
I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's very, I've heard many people speculate that in the future, instead of mining for gold on Earth, they will send robots to asteroids and get the gold and then bring it back.
Could it ever cost more to do that than the gold is worth?
I'm sure, but hopefully Elon's figuring that out. I've got a few more videos here about
Europe and...
Yeah. You were talking earlier about protests and stuff. This one doesn't have any sound. But this is Barcelona, Spain. I'm happy to see that it's not just the United States that has the crazy crowds versus the police protests that we've been having for months now. So, this is happening all around the world. I'm sure it's much worse in the United States than it is here. But pretty wild
Here, when
stuff.
you say that, here is in Barcelona or in Puerto Rico? Or
I'm talking about the United States. We've just seen horrific protests and looting and stuff. And this footage looks pretty crazy, but it's not nearly as crazy as what we've seen in the States.
But to be fair, the protests we've seen in the United States is some of this, but it's got like a racial inequality undertone.
Yeah, that's true.
Are there protests? I saw some protests 4 or 5 months ago in China between the borders of some of their, I don't know if they have districts or counties or whatever, but are there big protests going on in China, or does China just feel like... Because one thing I'm thinking about when I see all of this is China is this communist country where their government controls the people, right? In every way possible. And the rest of the Western world, we're seeing all of this debate of does our government have the ability to do these things? And you have riots and you have protests all over the world in more westernized countries, more democracies. So when I'm watching some of these videos, I'm just thinking are Chinese just totally okay with the status quo because they're already in a communist country and they wear the masks and they go on their business, and if the government says we're going to do this, they just do it? And then the rest of the world is like, oh my gosh, you can't lock us down, or you have to lock us down. There's so much more debate.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that's human nature. But in a country like China, where we don't have the same access. We don't see the same amount of news coming out of there, and it's all filtered and everything. I just wonder what's really going on behind the scenes in China, because when I see YouTubers from China, it just feels like we're all back to normal, everything's good.
I mean, it seems like they eradicated the virus somehow.
But I have a hard time holding that view in my mind. I'm like, there's no way. How could they do that?
I agree, but there's other, New Zealand, Australia's done a good job, Taiwan's done a good job, Japan's done a good job. And a lot of those are islands.
Yeah.
But
can we say Puerto Rico has done a great job?
No, I don't think we've done a very good job. I think I
don't know. I see a lot of people driving their cars wearing the masks, and so I'm like, maybe we're doing a really good job.
That's true. Let's go to France.
The picturesque area of Montmartre nearly empty. The French government says the measure will help stop the coronavirus spread, but for some, staying home a second time won't be easy.
I don't think lockdown is the best idea because it only delays things. So in the short term, things may get better, but once the lockdown is lifted, it will be the same as before and cases will rise again.
So
where is this? This looks like Ireland or something. What country?
I think Paris, France.
Oh, Paris.
So her point there has been my point from the very beginning. Like, I understand locking down to lower the curve because we can't overload hospitals. That makes total sense. But locking down to slow the spread, if the hospitals are not nearly overloaded, doesn't make sense to me unless there is truly a vaccine weeks away.
I think you said this once. Maybe our goal should be to have the virus spread as fast as possible, being just a certain percentage below hospital capacity. Because if you do New Zealand's route and there's no vaccine, like I'm suggesting, maybe there's not. There's also not just vaccine; it's also knowledge. We could find pharmaceuticals that are not vaccines that could help. Maybe it's just vitamin C and D and zinc. Could be the three perfect drugs that you could just take, and it's not a vaccine. But New Zealand, I kind of feel like they're just sitting ducks. Like, if we never get over this, or if the rest of the world somehow does get over it by herd immunity, but New Zealand never got it, if there's just enough virus still going around to infect them, they could be locked down forever. For a long period of time.
If there's no vaccine, that's everything. And so it's very difficult when you hear Trump say it's weeks away, and you feel like that sounds like 3 weeks away. But then I've heard other people say it'll be the end of this year, which still isn't bad. I mean, goodness, 8 weeks away? That's still great if that's the case. But even if that's true and it comes out in 8 weeks, how long will it take before the average person gets it?
I mean, Trump's acting like we have the military ready to disperse all these vaccines, but I was hearing a lot of these vaccines were saying we can't just do a vaccine in one injection. You're going to have it 2 or 3 times, a booster and another booster.
Yeah.
I don't know where they are with that, if that's still the consensus, but that just doubles and triples the number of vaccines you need.
We expected it. It seems necessary. They tried a curfew, but it didn't work. So now the most important thing is for everyone to play the game, to respect it, so we can live normally again.
There was some traffic in the city centre. The government's allowed some businesses and public services to remain open to help buoy the struggling economy. But office buildings in the financial district were shut.
Well, in the centre of Paris's business district, there are a few people out and about, but it's nowhere near as busy as it would be normally on a regular day. Tens of thousands of people work in this area, and the square behind me would usually be teeming with activity.
So, because of the new lockdowns and potentially beheadings in Paris, here's a crazy clip.
Just very briefly, they are fleeing Paris because of the lockdowns coming in Paris, and they're getting out of France, and gridlock around the boulevard periphery because they're all trying to leave Paris and get out before the lockdown. This is dystopian stuff. This is deeply disturbing.
Wait, this is what?
He is claiming...
Is this just normal rush hour traffic?
It could be. So this Sky News, I had never heard of it until this pandemic, but they do seem to be very right-leaning. So maybe this is bull, who knows, but they are suggesting that people are like fleeing not just the city of Paris, but the country of France.
Of course, has also got the terror attacks, another one apparently, or could be, we don't know yet for sure. But once you've had 2 decapitations, I imagine it's a fairly easy conclusion to draw what the latest was all about.
Rowan, what I don't understand, whether we're talking about the UK, France, Belgium, Spain, that lockdowns hard and long the first time and are still going through another wave, more infections than ever. What did China do? How did they just lock down for 2 to 4 weeks and then eliminate the virus allegedly? I mean, what is going on there? I mean,
We'll chat about that further. We've got
Sweden?
Sweden?
Hello?
Yeah, well, Sweden, exactly.
Oh, so she does bring up a fair point. Let's look at Sweden real quick, because Sweden's numbers are going down, which is good. However, when you compare Sweden's numbers to neighboring countries, Sweden still is not doing well. So Sweden has a deaths per million of 587, and I believe the United States is 713. So they're not as bad as the United States, but also you've got to think that Sweden wouldn't be anywhere near the United States. They're very spread out, you know what I mean, compared to big cities like New York City and stuff that really pumped our numbers up. Let me go full screen here. So,
is this Apple TV Stopper's office?
Yeah.
It's asking me to type in a code, but I can't see. I don't know if it's just under that camera 3. I was just going to cue something up on the Apple TV, but I don't know how I can do that.
I'll look at it in a second. So, their daily cases are spiking all over again. And let's look at, I mean, their deaths are low. They had massive spikes in the past, but it's starting to go up a little bit. But again, it's...
So let's look at this daily deaths chart right here. I have heard that there was a specific reason why people died in Sweden at the beginning. And was it that people got sick in big cities where there was a huge elderly population?
It was literally assisted living facilities.
Okay. So if we look at this chart again, I know you just took it off the screen, but if that chart looks like what everyone else has done with a lockdown, we locked down and we got all the deaths to a near historic low.
But they didn't.
But they didn't lock down.
Yeah.
So how do you explain the chart going down?
It certainly feels like herd immunity.
Or people were treating it differently. They were taking the like. I've also heard people make arguments that if you're in those Nordic countries, that maybe you weren't taking vitamin D, or it's not in your food. Some people were saying like some countries put vitamin D in their food, you know, kind of like we put fluoride in our water. And that if you live in an area where you get very little sunlight, this was an argument in New York. So many people live in apartments in New York that never really get true sunlight, that they were just vitamin D deficient.
I don't know, you keep going back to that like that's the cure. If you just take vitamin D and zinc, you'll be fine against this.
Did you listen to you listen to this podcast on Joe Rogan? Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. What is his little side hand? Who?
Young Jamie.
Jamie, yeah, Jamie got coronavirus and was sick for a day. Tested positive and
lot
got
of
over
people,
it. But he had been taking vitamin C, D, and zinc all the way through this.
I think currently in the United States, 40% of people who have it are completely asymptomatic.
Maybe those are the people that have enough vitamin D.
Sure, but you're finding an arrow and then drawing a...
All I'm saying with that chart is that maybe Sweden also did other things, like their people started, maybe they're healthier. Maybe they started taking other vitamins. There was other things they could have done. Maybe it started to become warm outside, so they started exercising more and like, but the chart looks exactly or similar enough to other countries who had a lockdown to reduce their deaths. And if Sweden did have a type of lockdown. We can't say that they were completely open because we talked to people from Sweden and their school system, it's like half the school was shut down, the other half was open. And they did have limitations on how many people go into the pubs and whatnot. But it wasn't locked down like France is doing.
And people
like,
weren't wearing masks.
Right. So something definitely happened around May to cause the numbers to go down without needing the same lockdown. But I think what you were going to get back to is the other countries surrounding Sweden still are faring better than Sweden.
Yeah, so like if I look up, like isn't Norway right next door? Norway has barely any deaths. It's loading very slowly. Did you get Apple TV working?
Yeah, the code finally popped up.
Cool. So let me look up Norway. So Norway, I don't know why it keeps doing this. Norway has 52 deaths per million.
Yeah, that's significant.
And
significantly lower.
But I've heard the prime minister or whatever of Sweden talk about this, and he's like, you can't compare us to Norway because our cities aren't the same as Norway. I don't. What's next to them as well? Is it Finland that's over there?
I mean, Finland's the country that looks like a big peninsula?
Yeah, big peninsula.
And
Finland is 65, so it's still nothing compared to the deaths in Sweden. But then he keeps pointing, like the prime minister keeps pointing towards one of the worst countries, Belgium. Look at Belgium, over 1,000 deaths per million in Belgium. And he's like, yeah, compare us to Belgium, we're doing great. And I don't know that that's really fair.
There's just so many little nuances here with like the difference in, you know, the population. And does Finland get the same tourism as Sweden? I mean, Finland's significantly more north than Sweden. And the airports, and there's just so many other things that you might have to look at that doesn't, it's like, why did Chicago fare different than New York City? I mean, they seem on the surface to be pretty similar, but Chicago didn't have nearly the deaths that New York had.
Right.
I think LA for a while, I don't remember now if it's evened out, but LA didn't have the same deaths that New York had.
No, not at all.
So it's like you think of them as two very similar cities on different coasts. Geographically, they're a little different, but New York had all the deaths and LA didn't.
I think it's just that public transportation in New York. Everybody in LA is in their car.
Speaking of New York, so last night was Halloween, and I thought, you know what, let me see what is going on in Times Square, because I posted a video on my Facebook. I did this Angus Young AC/DC Halloween costume like 2 or 3 years ago, and it was a blast running around. I just shared it, and some of my friends in New York were like, it is crazy to see New York look like that. And I'm like, what do you mean? You live in New York. And they were like, it doesn't look like that at all. Times Square is a ghost town. So last night I said, let's tune in to Times Square on Halloween night. And it looked exactly like it does tonight. This is a live view of Times Square.
Yeah.
Isn't it weird to see one of the most populated places in America?
I feel like that's what Times Square looks like at 3 a.m.
I mean, I don't even know if I've been there with it that dead. I mean, even at 3 in the morning, there's still people sitting up on the red bleachers and everything.
Yeah.
I thought last night maybe they would have candy and the police would have built something that was like perfectly safe and that it's like you could come here. There was no one in costume. It looked exactly like the screenshot you're seeing now.
Well, let's go back to the... Oh, we've got some super chats. Steve Robertson is in the house. Good evening, gentlemen. I just dropped in. Is PR going on lockdown again? I hope not. Have you heard any inkling of that?
I haven't.
Our mayor came out recently.
Governor or mayor?
Maybe governor. Governor.
Wanda?
Wanda, I guess it was her. I don't know who it was. But they have all these very specific rules, right? And I think one of the rules right now is like, can you have 50% of your patrons in a restaurant?
50%.
And she raised it from 50 to 55%. So I thought that was funny. Like, who can even keep track of 5% more or less patrons in a...
Well, 2 or 3 days ago, I went to San Juan, went to the mall, Las Americas, and...
The mall that you gave me crap for a few months ago for going to?
Did I give you crap on that?
Yeah.
But luckily, you'll never be able to find that clip.
I can find it because the name of that video is Did Lee Go to the Mall?
Yeah, I made that thumbnail. And there you are, like in the mall with ice cream or something. Yeah. But, you know, we all had the masks. They're taking your temperature to get in. You have to have the mask on the whole time. one side is everyone's walking one way, the other side they're walking the other. To get into every store, you have to it felt pretty safe. There's definitely more people, but it's 3 stories tall. It's open air, not open from the outside. But I'm thinking, like, is it better or worse than Walmart? I still think Walmart is the most dangerous place you could go. There's just I'm literally walking past people with my cart, brushing elbows and shoulders and stuff. But so the mall was crazy. But then we went to Old San Juan, and it was weird. There was no cruises, obviously. There was nobody downtown. There was like a few homeless people. But you would walk around Old San Juan and...
What about all those little knick-knack stores and stuff?
They had the people there doing the temperature, but...
But they were open? Most of the
stores
were open?
But we were the only ones going in.
That's
it was
weird
so
they'd even be open.
Strange. And so I went to this place, the place that we did that photo shoot with Pi. Beer and Empanadas, little like bar on the corner that's open air. So we went in there. There's maybe like 1 or 2 other people in there, but it's breezy. It wasn't like air conditioned. I still don't want to eat in a restaurant like that. And I asked the bartender, I'm like, what is it like I went on Friday. I was like, what is it like Friday night with no tourists here? And he's like, it gets crazy because all of the local Puerto Ricans now come into Old San Juan where they normally would not come.
Why?
Because it's just a touristy area. But now...
Oh, they like it now.
They like it now because there's no tourists. And,
funny.
it's probably, there's just smaller bars that you might like to go to have such a low capacity that if you like going to a bar with 30 people, well, it's only 15 now. You may not want to go there. And so he was like, yeah, from like about 7 o'clock, I can only have 20 people instead of 40. And he said by 10 o'clock, everything has to shut down. And so it just, you see all the graffiti. Like there was a lot of rioting done with our governor a year ago or so. Some of that's still there, but you see some other things that are like more lockdown oriented, where they're like graffiti and spray paint and busted out windows and stuff. But San Juan's kind of a ghost town. It was a little strange to go back there because I haven't been to Old San Juan in 8 months or so, a year. I don't know the last time I was there.
We are lucky with the weather down here because it's like perpetually summer here.
Yeah.
So I think as this second wave ramps up because of the climate in the United States, I'm hoping that will not happen in Puerto Rico simply because it's warm. And we can eat outside year-round. We never have to eat in our restaurant.
This will be the time of the year where it might feel like being in Puerto Rico is the better decision.
Absolutely.
Because all these places that are getting cold, we're getting our first snow in places like Boston and Chicago. Outdoor seating is not going to be an option anymore. It might already not be an option. I was hearing people say it's 30 degrees in Chicago. And I was like, already? But being down here, I forget how cold it is back in the States.
We've got one more super chat. Sam Tagree says, 2 days before the election, how worried are you guys? CNN just had a report that the poll is predicting Trump will win. I saw that report.
CNN has a poll? Because we're going to get into the election, I'm sure, here in a minute. But I filmed some segments on what the polling numbers are. And I saw Biden up on all of them.
There's different polls. So CNN had an interview with some conservative pollster company who got it right last time when everybody was wrong. And he once again thinks that he's going to be right this time. I don't know. I've said before, like, I think in many policies, I lean more conservative, so I would normally vote that way. But I just want like a honorable person as president, and I know a lot of people think that Biden isn't honorable, but I just want somebody who's like.
So Jill Stein.
I don't even know who Jill Stein is.
Is Kanye West more or less honorable than Donald Trump in your opinion?
Much less.
Much less? So you couldn't vote Kanye either?
No way, dude. You know, I tried to watch the Kanye West Joe Rogan interview.
Yeah.
Did you watch any of that?
No, but I've heard it was just a shit show.
Well, what made me so depressed was how many people, including close friends, I'll name drop somebody, Pi Jerza, said, man, Kanye is a genius. And I'm like, he is literally dumb. I'll leave it at that. Like, he cannot...
He's like Trump, right? He can't stay on topic and he just
At least
spits
Trump
out.
can get up in front of people and kind of like has a wave that he can follow, and you're like, all right, I get it. You know, what Trump is saying I think is like crazy most of the time or just plain wrong. Kanye West could not say a full sentence without his brain going somewhere else, talking about something else. And the stuff he would say, and I only watched the first 45 minutes, so maybe he became a genius later.
Yeah.
But in the first 45 minutes, everything he said sounded so dumb. It was like a really confident 15-year-old. That's what it felt like. Who has no real talent himself, but he's got so much money now that he can just like hire people to make shoes and clothing and houses. And so he's just kind of like, he has these dumb ideas that 15-year-olds have.
But he's actually able to execute
But he
them.
can do it, yeah. But he isn't doing anything. He's just paying people to do stuff, which is great, fine, like I'm all about it. But the way he talks, he just sounds so dumb to me. And now Joe Rogan said he's going to vote for Kanye, and I'm like, what is this world coming to?
I can't figure that out because I respect Joe Rogan. I think he's extremely intelligent. You hear him talk on podcasts like we're doing, and he's way more knowledgeable about things than you and I are.
And he's reasonable.
And he's very reasonable. I mean, he had Andrew Yang on there, and he had Bernie Sanders on there. And one critique is Joe Rogan always seems to pick the side of the guy he's interviewing. But for him to come out and say he's going to vote for Kanye, that seems very strange to me.
I know.
And a lot of people think that Kanye West is kind of is like a party ruiner for Biden. Like black people will vote for Kanye, which will help Trump secure the presidency. But I don't know. He was in Charleston at the beginning of his campaign run. I don't know that he did many of these. Like he was not in the spotlight at all. And he came to Charleston, South Carolina to do a speech. And I was so tempted, like, there's coronavirus going on, so I was like, I can't go up there. But I was curious. And the clips that I saw come out of there, they were like black women like yelling at Kanye, like just yelling at him. And it just seemed like everything was falling apart.
Well, he was going crazy. He started crying about the idea of aborting his daughter or something. Like, he was
That's what it was he said
mind.
In Charleston, yeah. Did he do that again on the Joe Rogan?
He got into that a little bit, but what was so frustrating to me about Joe Rogan, at least in the past, has been really good about holding his interviewers' feet to the fire. Like if they say something crazy, he'll be like, hold on a minute. What do you mean by that? Or hold on, let's look this up. And he just did that really well with, who's the crazy guy who was just on?
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones. Every time he said something crazy and then tried to change the subject, Joe was like, no, let's go back to what you were just saying. Jamie, look this up. And a lot of what Alex was saying at least had bits of truth to it. He didn't do that with Kanye at all. He let Kanye talk for an hour straight without ever interrupting, and Kanye wouldn't answer any questions. He would start to answer questions, then he'd start talking about shoes and homes and aborting children and running for president and how we should treat women. It was just like he was literally lost his mind.
Yeah.
And then Joe would be like, man, why do people say you're crazy, man? You're a genius. I'm like, why are... He's perpetuating his insanity. And then he was telling him like, man, when these doctors prescribed you drugs, I can't believe you took that. I would never take that. You shouldn't take that. You're not crazy. You don't have to take those drugs. You're a genius. You're smarter than those doctors. And I'm like, why is he...
I wonder if there's
like
something else going on behind the scenes. Like, the Kardashians are one of the largest empires in America, like at least in that, entertainment world. And I wonder, Joe Rogan's one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid podcaster in the world, the largest viewership and all that. I don't know if Adam Carolla, there's a few people that have those kind of audiences. And I wonder if it's just like Joe knows I kind of have to kiss his ass a little bit because I work with them and these groups of people a lot. In a different way that like he's never going to have to deal with Andrew Yang or Bernie Sanders ever again in that same capacity, but they rub shoulders a little bit more.
That's just why I liked listening to Joe Rogan, because I felt like he went into things with an open mind, but when somebody said something dumb, he would be like, hold on a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And I didn't watch the whole podcast.
Did he talk about like apes? If you had to fight an ape, would you rather?
He'd know, because Joe didn't speak. He just let Kanye
It sounds
rant.
a lot like the last Peter Schiff interview. Wasn't there one where it also...
That was awful. But see, the difference there was Peter Schiff was ranting and raving and going, and Peter, they were on Zoom, so Peter couldn't hear when Joe was
There's
talking.
the delay, and he's trying to interject.
But what Peter was saying made great sense. Peter sounded very intelligent, but Joe kept wanting to interject and be like, hold on, what do you mean by that? Whoa, that sounds crazy. But then Peter couldn't hear him, and Peter was just keep going and going, and it was super difficult to listen to. I had to turn it off. I was cringing because Joe was getting so pissed off. But anyway, my point is why does Joe treat every guest that way, call them out if they say something crazy?
Except for Kanye.
Except for Kanye West. And then
unless
he's
he
gonna
just
vote for
knows that Kanye really is mentally dealing with some demons, and he doesn't feel like he can do that. I mean, if you were
Doesn't feel like he can do what?
If you were talking to somebody who really has a mental health issue, do you...
I wouldn't tell them you shouldn't take your medicine.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. World Traveler 614 wants to know, Lee, why do you only wear black and gray? Pooping on.
I don't understand what that means, but I'm literally wearing khaki pants right now.
So, maybe it looks gray on the screen.
Yeah, so I'm not pooping on right now. Thank you, World Traveler. All right, let's watch some more videos.
Yeah, we have a lot to get through. I didn't think we had that much in this show, but...
So, a second ago we were talking a little bit about, a true lockdown should probably be young people don't lock down, but vulnerable people do. This is pretty interesting here. What the hell's going on?
Super, super interesting.
Did our server cut off? What's it doing? I've never seen
There
DLC. There we go.
yesterday, Rexburg, Idaho, the #1 COVID hotspot in the entire country. It is a very small city with a very large college population, right? So it has the highest rate. Nobody, well, I wouldn't say nobody, but I'd say 50% of the people I saw wore a mask. I talked to college students. They said not once have they ever been asked to put a mask on.
Can I say this guy has the weirdest hairline? Have you ever seen hair come down that low on someone's forehead? I feel like his hairline should be 2 inches higher. It's like he's wearing a helmet or something.
I don't think you could yeah, I mean, if I pull back.
I don't know. I mean, I'm obviously jealous.
But
yeah,
any restaurant
noticing
or
unimportant things
supermarket,
here.
most of their friends don't wear it. One young woman said, hey, I just had it. And her friend says, oh, that's interesting. They still weren't wearing masks. So that hospital is actually fine because the vast majority of people who have gotten sick there are young people, and if they have to be hospitalized, it's for a very short period of time. And so I actually went into the ER yesterday afternoon, and it was empty, not a single person there. So it really gives you a sense of the variety of what we're seeing across the country, and really that sense that some of these hospitals are empty because young people are getting sick serves to continue and prolong that vicious circle of people saying, well, this really can't be real. People aren't really getting sick, so why should I wear a mask? Why should I practice hygiene? Why should we socially distance?
So this kind of leads me to remember what I talked about in the last video. Somebody sent me a chart, and I haven't been able to find this chart or double check it, but the chart was showing teachers who have gotten COVID who work remotely 100% of the time, work remotely and in person, and work 100% of the time in person. And the teachers who work 100% of the time remotely had a slightly higher infection rate than the ones that work with the children directly every single day.
Have you come up with a better conclusion as to why?
I don't know. I've talked to a few people about this, and people are like, well, it's probably because they feel like they can live a more wild life because they don't have to interact with the children. So they're like going to the bar after their Zoom classes or something. I don't know. I thought...
I think I made the speculation that it was the age. Maybe older teachers are staying at home. And then, but why would they have a worse rate, though? I can't remember my own reasoning. They're like the younger teachers would be like, oh, I'm willing to go into the classroom because I'm young and I'm healthier. But then the older teachers stay home. But maybe the younger teachers are getting the virus but not getting tested, or not. They're asymptomatic.
That
but
was my theory.
The older teachers have it. and then you know for certain they have it because
they feel
really
sick, so they get tested and they get counted. I don't know. I mean, I think I said this in the last video. There was this headline, might have been CNN or something, but it was like, North Carolina school teacher dies of COVID. And the way it's written, you think like, oh my gosh, like they gave their life for these children. But then when you read the article, you see that the teacher didn't get the virus from the students. The teacher got it from the spouse or something.
Yeah.
So it's kind of difficult to...
One of our readers or viewers says, but young people actually get it way more and spread it more. Even if the fatality is super low in that group, they still have it and are spreading it. FFS, for fuck's sake. You got to think deeper than the surface level, guys.
Okay.
But this is exactly the point. The point is to not lock down the younger people, but to protect the older people so that the younger people do spread it more, do get it, but they are quarantined off from the more susceptible people, and then they will all have immunity, and then at some point the spreading will drop dramatically once the super spreading group has already had it and now can't spread it.
And I spoke with a doctor who has been working front lines with COVID patients. He himself got it, recovered from it, and he told me that he does not believe that asymptomatic people can spread the virus. He said no other virus works like that. The whole point is
to cough and have...
It's replicating in your body, which is causing you to have stuffy nose, which is causing you to sneeze and cough, and that's what replicates it. And if he believes that it is not, there's not as much virus in asymptomatic people than sick people.
Yeah. But that's kind of contrary to what a lot of the media is telling.
I know, but we've heard both things from the WHO and the CDC. I mean, they flip-flopped on this multiple times. Don't you remember months ago when one day the CDC came out and said, we do not believe asymptomatic people can spread it? Whereas before that, we believed that asymptomatic people were the biggest spreaders of all.
Yeah.
Like, that's the biggest flop we've had on this whole thing. So I don't know what the truth is.
Do you have a clip of, not change the topic, but this doctor was making a point of this on Facebook yesterday. The clip, do you have the clip of Trump saying how doctors are getting paid more to code people as having COVID?
I do not have that clip.
I think a lot of people know this clip. Like on a rally a day or two ago, Trump came out and said that the reason everything is so bad is because doctors are getting paid more to say somebody has coronavirus. And there's like a bit of truth in it, but it's very twisted. And this doctor wrote something about it. He's like, as a doctor in Puerto Rico, traveling to multiple hospitals in the United States, working with COVID patients, no doctor is getting paid more. In fact, many doctors are getting paid less for X number of reasons. Maybe their pay is getting cut, their hours are getting cut, all the elective surgeries are getting cut, and so they're not making money that way. But the part of it that is kind of true is the hospitals are coding things for COVID, and then they're getting more money to help support the hospital. But that money is not directly going to the doctors. And so that's been something people have been debating the last day or so.
I've seen a lot of people outraged at Trump for that, and they're like, I'm a doctor, I'm still waiting on my check. But in that case, I feel like I knew what Trump meant, and he's talking about the hospitals getting the extra payments from the government.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not outraged by that one. What is next? Well, okay, this is a good one. This is a weird one by Trump Jr., and I think I may have seen this on Fox News, but then I couldn't find it. They probably pulled it for obvious reasons. But I saw the clip on CNN.
I went through the CDC data because I kept hearing about new infections, but I was like, well, why aren't they talking about deaths? Oh, because the number is almost nothing, because we've gotten control of this thing. We understand how it works. They have the therapeutics to be able to deal with this. If you look at that, look at my Instagram, it's gone to almost nothing. We're outperforming Europe in a positive way so well because we've gotten a hold of this.
That is a lie. And it is a slap in the face of the hundreds of thousands of Americans who have died and will die from the coronavirus.
Like, why would he even say that? And Trump, So Trump has been doing all these rallies and stuff, and every time he keeps saying we're rounding the corner when cases are going through the roof, which may not matter, but deaths are slowly starting to tick up.
Doesn't it depend what corner you're rounding? If you're on the bottom and rounding, like you could be rounding the corner.
But Trump keeps acting like, hey, we're almost out of this.
It's almost Easter again. We're not that, we're getting closer to Easter.
That's true. He did say it would be gone by Easter. But I don't know why he would say that. And then Trump Jr. is basically saying, like, there's no deaths whatsoever, even though the United States has 1,000 deaths a day. It just seems really weird. But then she goes a little bit deeper into maybe what specifically he was talking about here.
Let's start with the facts before we get to his smirk. He says this on the very day that nearly 1,000 Americans died from COVID, according to Johns Hopkins. He says this on the very day the number of cases in the U.S. hit its highest mark of the pandemic. And he says this as the nation sees a 44% rise in hospitalizations this month. He says this as 17 states report record high hospitalizations yesterday. It appears that he's basing his argument on a CDC table that shows provisional numbers and presenting them as actual numbers. The CDC's disclaimer on its provisional numbers literally says, quote, the number of deaths reported in this table are the total number of deaths received and coded as of the date of analysis and do not represent all deaths that occurred in that period.
So she goes on to explain that sometimes death certificates can take days or weeks to show up. And so the chart that he's specifically talking about shows very little deaths, but it's not accurate at all because the CDC is waiting for the official death certificates.
So he's cherry-picked a certain time frame where...
I guess, but it's just weird because you can go to any website that tracks the deaths and see, like, we've been pretty steady at around 1,000 a day for months now.
Whereas the ones in Europe we just looked at, they've been 0 and 5 and 10.
Yeah.
And now they're up to a couple hundred.
Yeah, so it's pretty weird. So we've got you have some other videos here that I don't feel like are related to anything.
Mine are not so much coronavirus. They're more political and they're more other news stories that have been filling in the last week. At least in America. And this is our last show probably before the election. Are we going to do an election live show?
I don't know. I heard that, is Joe Rogan doing one with Crazy Guy? They were talking about
Alex
it at
Jones?
the end. Yeah.
I think there's going to be so many live shows. And so then that makes me wonder, do you guys want to spend election night or some portion of election night with us? Or could we do a live show with another live show? Or should we just not do a live show and we're going to watch some live show that we want to watch to begin with?
Yeah, I kind of just feel like there's going to be so many other live shows that'll be better to watch than ours. However, Kristen, your fiance, for a second said that she all of a sudden wanted to come on the live show and like...
I don't know that she's going to do that, but she was telling me... that she's always thrown an election party.
Okay.
And so she wanted to have like a small women's get-together, which would mean you and I are invited because we live here. And so she wanted to have a election night party. And at this point, like, I really don't know what's going to happen with the election, but I keep warning her, like, Tuesday night, I don't know that we're going to find out who's the president at the end of I mean, it might be another 2 months before we know. But I was like, there is a chance, and I think a decent chance, that Tuesday night is going to ruin your world if Trump wins. You know, she'll get really emotional about seeing Trump. Like half of America is going to be, it's going to be way worse. You saw the memes from the Hillary loss. If Trump wins this election, I mean, this is all about like where we are mentally throughout this whole virus. I think if Trump wins, we're going into like some sort of civil war. I think you're going to see Supreme Courts of states not acknowledging him as president. I think you're going to see riots in the streets like you've never seen before. I think if Trump wins the presidency, it is going to be awful. But the way that all of this other stuff's going on with the Supreme Court saying how can you count the votes and all of this, I think that if Trump loses, it's also going to be pretty bad. I don't know that he's going to give up power. I don't know how far the far right will go. I mean, you saw these videos of like people around Biden's...
I know, it's so disgusting.
And so I don't know if Trump loses how bad that reaction could be. My gut tells me it will be less bad than if Trump wins. But I don't know that having a party on election night, and is it safe to say this neighborhood is more libertarian, conservative, probably?
I think so.
So I don't know how many people there are that are going to be,
Steve Robertson just gave us $50, and he says, donation for a few gallons of fuel for the boat. Thank you so much, Steve. He's always the most generous guy. He's always...
What is that? Is it
Mr. Moneybags.
Is it like 15 gallons? Is that what he bought?
It depends on which marina we buy the fuel at, I guess. The boat at the moment, what's wrong with the boat? The generator just blew up the other day. But we thought we were going to have to replace it. That would have been 10 or 15 grand. But apparently they can fix it. The guy was supposed to show up.
It still has a lot of hours on it, so even if they fix it...
The generator's old. We knew that. The heat exchangers on both engines need to be cleaned. The guy was supposed to come do that twice, never showed up. So that has to be done. The shore power to battery charger, whatever, some sort of AC to DC converter is broken. So people tried to use the boat today, wouldn't start because the batteries all died. What else? What else is broken?
Did we get the coolers? Or did you already talk? You just said that?
What coolers?
Don't we have some kind of new cooling system that we're trying to install? Inline cooling system to help keep the engines cooler?
The blowers, yeah, like
the
that.
Blowers.
Yeah, they're gonna the heat exchangers. Yeah, that needs to be cleaned. We paid some guy to replace the horn on the front of the boat, and he shattered one of our windshields. Like we have 4 windshields on the front of the boat, and he broke one. And
luckily, the one that cracked though was a dummy sheet like window that was over fiberglass.
Yeah.
So it's not like the interior of the boat is getting wet, but.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out if we need to replace it or not. I don't know. I think that's like 10 grand. So
I already see why people say, the greatest days of owning a boat are the day you buy.
Yeah.
It was a fun day.
Yeah.
And then the day that you sell.
Yeah.
But hopefully we can squeeze a couple other good days in there.
Yeah, so Mike Kelly is coming with his girlfriend in a couple weeks, and I was just talking to him yesterday. So we're going to do a big Virgin Island trip on the boat, spend a few nights on it. That should be fun.
It's going to have to be U.S., right?
Yeah, U.S.
British.
I think British is still closed. Yeah, so, I mean, a lot of these videos, we don't even be talking about Dan Blazarian. What else?
I think a big fear with all of this is just kind of where we're getting in the political world of censorship, It seems like there is we've experienced it on this channel, We want to talk about some of the crazy conspiracy theories that were going on over the summer, and next thing we know, YouTube is pulling our content down. Sometimes it's because of copyright infringements, which are strange. Sometimes it was like, pull it down so that your video gets more infamous. And then other times it was like the content creator just does not want their video talked about, even though it is, commentary. But one of the big stories is this Biden laptop thing. And the New York Post, I believe, is the one that posted this article. And then Twitter blocked them from Twitter, saying that they are breaking their terms of service. For the last 4 years, we've heard nothing but Russia has colluded in our election. Or maybe Trump was, Russia had an influence of our election. It all came down to Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica and all that stuff, and they were buying ads. So we know that there's a problem with this sort of meddling and disinformation. We did a video on AI recently where we talked about this. A big problem for America is going forward. Also goes back to the social dilemma that you still haven't watched. Is that how are we as humans going to differentiate what's true and what's false? But the problem with that is how are you going to decide what can be talked about and what can't be talked about? And so this video is just a video, I think it's of Ted Cruz arguing with the founder of Twitter.
Who the hell put you in charge? That video?
I think so. It's a shorter clip.
Specifically the enforcement.
You're still blocking their posts. You're still blocking their posts. Right now, today, you're blocking their posts.
We're not blocking the post. Anyone can tweet.
Can the New York Post post on their Twitter account?
If they go into their account.
No is your answer to that. No. Unless they reflect and agree with your dictates. Let me ask you something. You claimed it was because of a hacked materials policy. I find that facially highly dubious and clearly employed in a deeply partial way. Did Twitter block the distribution of the New York Times' story a few weeks ago that purported to be based on copies of President Trump's tax returns?
We didn't find that a violation of our terms of service and this policy in particular because it was reporting about the material. It wasn't distributing the material.
Okay, well, that's actually not true. They posted what they purported to be original source materials, and federal law, federal statute makes it a crime, a federal felony, to distribute someone's tax returns against their knowledge. So that material was based on something that was distributed in violation of federal law, and yet Twitter gleefully allowed people to circulate that. But when the article was critical of Joe Biden, Twitter engaged in rampant censorship and silencing.
So there's many arguments you could use for this. This is just the one that's happening right now. But the idea is, have these companies gotten so big to where they're not just... Because what I want to say is these are private companies and they should be able to do whatever they want. F-stoppers, I should be able to ban or shadow ban whoever I want if they leave ridiculous comments, regardless if they're true or false, you know? I should have the right to do that. It's my business, and I want to set a standard of what's acceptable on my website. But the problem with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all of these platforms is that the big ones like Facebook and Twitter, I mean, they're almost now so big that they literally are the way that people digest news.
Yeah.
They have real power. And this is what kind of I get tripped up on with the Democratic Party is that they say, how dare Facebook allow Russia to do this thing that gets Donald Trump to be elected? But then at the same time, they're like, we want to ban certain things to do basically the same thing. We want to ban certain knowledge or certain ideas, certain freedoms of speech to predict an outcome, which is kind of the same exact thing that happened in the last election. And so, I don't know, like I'm finding myself, I don't know what political view this is, but I'm finding myself more on the side of maybe we do need to regulate these companies. Maybe we do need to have accountability that says, like how is it that you can have flat earth conspiracy theories and JFK conspiracy theories, but you can't have Joe Biden smoking crack conspiracy theories? Like they all seem kind of to me the same on one level, but some of them might even have more truth. But if you're going to ban it while it's happening, JFK happened decades ago. We can speculate about that. We can speculate about the moon landing. But if you ban something that's happening right now, it's almost the worst possible thing you could do because there's no open dialogue on this topic.
I agree. But to, play devil's advocate and kind of put all the information out there, the clip that you show doesn't show kind of the whole story. First of all, I believe that they have... Twitter has apologized. They said they made a mistake, and you can now share that post. He claimed that the reason they didn't allow it at first was because it was stolen or hacked material. So, Hunter Biden brought the laptop in, left it there. The guy went into his hard drive. I don't know if you could say illegally or illegally, whatever.
I don't know. It seems like the story is he sent it to a repair facility. So he should be able to go in, and then he never came back to get it, and at some point it becomes the property of the store.
I agree. I think it's shady that
there's a lot of
Twitter
shadiness on the other side. I'm not trying to say the Hunter Biden story is true. There is craziness on both sides of it, no matter how you look at it. But the idea that you can't talk about this was happening on Reddit. Reddit had if you even mentioned this story, they would ban your account. And you could go into these threads and see.
Weird.
You could see all of these threads where the top thread was a user that was banned and no longer on the platform anymore.
Janine says, Lee, it was still banned. Dorsey lied. So if that's the case, that's insane and that's crazy.
I don't want to make this about the Hunter Biden story. We have friends, Milak, who they just write crazy stuff on Facebook about guns or about protests or whatever it is. It's their views. And again, I get it. It's the Facebook platform. They can, on some level, choose what they want to be acceptable. But we've seen a pattern of certain people getting blocked based on their political views. And it gets really scary where we have the freedom of speech to help prevent these sort of things. And so on one hand, you're like, well, they're autonomous, they're their own corporation, they should be able to do what they want. But then on the other hand, these are such big utilities that I feel like it's a little unfair at this point to say, I mean, literally, Mark Zuckerberg could
change the election.
Change an election. And I think that's kind of the scary world that we're in. And I remember when this whole coronavirus stuff started, one of my biggest fears was some of these basic freedoms that we have as Americans or as citizens in other countries will be undermined. Because this isn't just a US thing. I mean, China blocks a lot of stuff on Google and Facebook. But what happens in Europe? I mean, maybe Facebook allows certain things that are going to affect the outcome of the way people think and societies think in other countries.
Yeah.
So it's this very scary world that we live in now where on one hand it's exciting, we all have a say, we all have a voice. But on the other hand, it's like, do people need accountability or should there truly be free speech? The Joe Rogan podcast, he was just making the argument that the best possible way to fight disinformation is to have more information. You should be able to dig deeper and find out more about every topic that you want. If you want to say the moon landing's fake and is a hoax and we have to ban that, like,
it
just
makes you feel like, oh, he was onto something. Maybe.
Yeah, and I can then not watch conspiracy videos that disprove the conspiracy theory on the lunar. You know, there's all these photography videos that are really interesting about shadows and like how it really was the sun that produced the lighting scene. I don't know. It's just, I feel like that's a very, very scary game that we're playing. And it's a game that needs to be played, and it has to go through the courts. But typically, I would have been of the mindset, I don't want Congress to regulate companies like Facebook. They worked hard to build that business. And what if F-stoppers reached a certain threshold where we're now more like Facebook, and they are going to tell us what we can and can't do on our website? I would be like, that seems wrong. But at some point, you get to where you're like, Facebook is the richest or one of the richest companies in the world. Amazon is one of, if not the richest company in the world. You know, and I don't know, I feel like this is one of those things that we're dealing with that's going to play out in politics, but for it to happen right now in an election, it's just kind of scary to see how all of this is.
But from what I have seen, I have a few Facebook friends, and some of them are friends in my real life, who have gone down this dark path of these conspiracy theories with like COVID's not real, and if like wearing the mask gives you COVID and 5G gives you COVID and all this stuff. And they will post the dumbest stuff on Facebook.
Yeah.
We're friends with one of them. And he will post the dumbest stuff on Facebook that is easily disproven. And it'll be like a meme. It'll be a photo of something with text on it. And Facebook will not show it. And Facebook will, you'll
have to do a click.
Yeah. And it will disprove it right there on Facebook. It'll be like, this picture has been doctored. This picture, like the history of this. And it does a really good job of
fact checking it. Does the user see that too, or just his audience?
I don't know, but I have seen him specifically get furious at Facebook. Like, how dare you silence what I'm posting? But from my perspective, I would think he would just be super embarrassed for posting really dumb.
He may not even know if he doesn't get the notifications.
But I think he does, because he's like, look at what Facebook's doing, and he's showing it. And then I have another friend who he believes in every conspiracy. And I've seen him write this multiple times. If Facebook or Twitter hides it, and says that this is disinformation, that's proof it's true.
Yeah.
Why else would they do that?
That's very dangerous too. But you have people like Alex Jones, who I just saw an article where a lot of people at Spotify are pissed off that their largest podcaster, Joe Rogan, had the very guy that Spotify banned from their platform. I mean, all these platforms took away Alex Jones' platform.
I didn't know
So Alex
that.
Jones was on YouTube, he was on Spotify, he was probably on Apple Music or Apple iTunes, He was banned from all that. Now you have to go, what is his site, like InfoWars?
Yeah.
what if me just saying InfoWars gets this video pulled? Like, it's a very dangerous world we live in. But when you watch the Alex Jones video, I don't know what to think of him. I haven't watched a lot of Alex Jones videos. I know he's very polarizing. But when you see some of the stuff he's talking about, and then they're looking it up on the spot, and I was arguing with you that just because they found some articles that seem to say what he is saying is true, doesn't mean that what he's saying is true. It just means that there are articles written about what he's saying. But it feels wrong to me to say that you're not able to put that view out into the world. On these platforms that, when they were small, maybe you could say, yeah, YouTube doesn't want to be associated with that. But now that YouTube is the 3rd largest website in the world, it just seems very scary. It's starting to feel a lot like China, where we're controlling what you think and believe, and we can set the narrative, and we can meddle in the election the way that we want. I was kind of making the argument that Facebook seemed very right-wing if they allowed Russia to let Trump win the election. But now it feels like Facebook is kind of left-wing.
Well, that's what's so difficult about this. You hear Trump complaining every day that, the liberals are scamming the election with these mail-in ballots or whatever. But then when you read the news of what's going on, it'll be like some super right-wing postal worker threw away a bunch of Biden things or whatever. Like a bunch of ballots were found in the dumpster, but they were mostly Biden. And the same thing goes for Facebook. I have read recently a few different articles about how Facebook employees are leaving because they don't think Facebook is either doing enough to ban all like the crazy right-wing conspiracy people, or that their algorithm helps right-wing posts show up more often than liberal posts. So you have the liberals and the Republicans complaining about Facebook for the exact same thing.
Meanwhile, as Facebook stock just keeps going up, I just don't see how they're. I mean, the next video I had was it was just about Twitter, because we're talking about Twitter. Twitter's stock dropped 21% today.
Oh, really?
21%.
Sarah, that stock is
Friday,
under pressure because the company added just 1 million of their key user metric, that are monetizable daily active users, adding just 1 million over the course of the quarter, ending the quarter with 187 million monetizable daily active users versus an estimate of 195 million.
So as of this video, it looks like it's just down 11%.
Yeah.
It went down another 9%.
Yeah.
That fell short of expectations, but the company did beat on the top and bottom line, reporting revenue of 936 million versus a 777 million estimated, and earnings per share for Twitter coming in at 19 cents versus a 6 cents estimated in EPS. But I want to point out 2 key things here in their earnings release. They do say the period surrounding the U.S. election is somewhat uncertain, but we have no reason to believe that September's revenue trends, which are plus 19%, can't continue or even improve outside of the election-related window. Now, I did speak to Ned Siegel, he's Twitter CFO, and I asked him about the fact that Twitter's user growth was so slow in Q3, and he told me this. He said between the U.S. election and ongoing product improvements, we remain optimistic that we can continue to deliver daily active user growth over time. He said the fourth quarter is typically seasonally slow, but it doesn't typically have a U.S. election in it, and he went on to say that the election they see as a key time to show people that Twitter is a trusted place for news and information, and to show all the progress they've been making about the health of the platform. But as you see there, Sarah, those Twitter shares are down. Despite the improvement in revenue, it does seem like there is meaningful concern that last quarter's significant user growth may have just been a one-quarter blip.
I always wonder how Twitter makes money, because I don't feel like I see the same ads. Maybe because I use a third-party app or something, but I don't see the same sponsored posts. It's like that with Reddit. If I go to Reddit's website, I see sponsored stuff everywhere, but if I just use a third-party app as a reader, like, I don't see any way that they're making money.
Yeah, I don't.
Facebook, I mean, you have to be on their platform. As far as I know, are there third-party apps you can use to filter? Mike Kelly's always talking about that. He put some plug-in that removes all like ads and political talk and everything to where
Newsfeed Eradicator. It's a plug-in you can get, not for a phone. Most people go on Facebook on their phone, so
yeah,
no help there. What is this GDP up video?
This was the story on Friday. They released the third quarter GDP numbers.
Breaking news this morning. This is the first read for the third quarter GDP. It was up, growing 33.1%, beating the expectation, which called for a growth of 31%. Jobless claims coming down to 751,000 unemployment claims and 7.75 million continuing claims, also above estimates. Joining me right now to break down these numbers.
Above estimates in a good way or below? Like, because don't we want continuing claims to be down?
Yeah, I don't know how she worded that in a really weird way. I would imagine that's not good, though. Well, this woman thought it was good.
Is Macro Maven's president, Stephanie Pomboy. Stephanie, it's always a pleasure. Thanks very much for being here. Your reaction to the GDP and the jobless numbers?
I mean, fantastic. Obviously, the GDP number was even beat the consensus expectations. I can get into the detail on that in a second. But I would say, in terms of looking forward, obviously the third quarter GDP is a backward-looking number. That unemployment claims number may be even more important than GDP this morning. And, it ticked down, and continuing claims ticked down, which is incredibly positive. So I think that bodes well for the fourth quarter.
I always wonder what someone like Peter Schiff would say. Like, it ticked down because are there more people just giving up or not qualifying, or people are working just enough that they don't qualify? I was talking to my sister, and I mean, she's on unemployment, and she's like, it's helping her get through, but like she's starting to kind of dip into her savings just now. So I think that's the fear for a lot of Americans, is how long could you survive on the unemployment before you have to start dipping into savings, and then how leveraged are you on your savings?
How long does unemployment go for?
I can't remember. It's like a long time. It's over a year, I believe.
Really?
I thought it was 60-something weeks. And then in 2008, they extended it. I don't know. I can't remember. We've talked about it before, but it's slipping my mind right now.
Got a super chat from Steve Robertson. It's all good until you become the target of these crackpot stories. I prefer curated content. I see what you're saying, Steve, but the scary thing is that, if whatever side of the aisle you're on, what if the owner of this curated company is on the other side? And so they're just going to say, like, anything that helps that guy, we're going to ban, and anything that helps my guy, we're going to push to the top of everybody's feed.
Well, did you see this video? Scary. It was a Tucker Carlson video, so I have to believe you did see it. But I think it came from the Biden laptop story, but it was like the next layer on it. It was an email chain of a veteran who served in the Iraq War or something, the Afghanistan War, and he was saying that this email got released, or maybe he released it, but it was a conversation with Hunter Biden, who was referring to the big man, which was supposed to be Joe Biden, and it was like all of these deals, and he was not just a military veteran, but he was a business partner involved with the Bidens.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I didn't make up these emails. I released them because I thought it was my duty to release them. And they're emails sent to me, through me, but none of the words that you're reading are my words. They're just words of these people doing these dealings, and it looks incriminating to the Bidens, I think.
Okay.
And he was just saying that no one was picking up this story, but instead they were curating the story to where they were basically saying he and his family are complete liars. This is all made up, and they were throwing his whole name through the mud. And so he was coming out and saying, I have to release this, not because I want to, but because, and I have to speak out, not because I want to, but because I feel like I have to. My name has been dragged so much in the dirt because the whole story isn't being told. If you hadn't seen the video, then you probably
I did watch
don't necessarily know what I'm talking about.
Sitting in a hotel room or something. Right?
Yeah, and I'm listening to this guy speak, and I'm always trying to figure out, is the person lying? Are they credible? But he just sounded like a down-to-earth guy who was like, my name has gotten dragged into the mud, I am this guy trying to make up this fake Russian story. I think that's what it came down to. They were saying it was Russian propaganda. And he was like, this is my life. These are emails that I have in my account that I've been tagged on, that I did 10 years, however long ago it was. And he was just like, it felt very wrong for people to say that me and my family are part of a Russia collusion story. And he's like, I have to release this. So I guess to that comment, it's just, and it's probably what you just said, but it depends on what side of the coin you are. If your name's dragged in the mud and you want to defend yourself, You don't want it to be curated on that side.
Yeah.
But then in the same time, if your name's, it's kind of like the what was the guy who got nominated for the Supreme Court? Kavanaugh?
Yeah.
That story on both sides, the stuff Kavanaugh was saying seemed crazy. But then the stuff the girl was saying, and when you started hearing her friends that were there couldn't collaborate that story either, it just felt like on both sides there was huge questions. I feel like the Michael Jackson story is kind of like that. There's huge allegations on all these different sides, but like, you want to be able to hear everything so that you can dig down and come up with your own conclusion. Yeah. If you were Michael Jackson and he was still alive and he was like, Twitter will not let me share my story, or if you're the boys accusing Michael Jackson and they're like, we will not let you tell it, like, you can't live in a world like that. You have to, unfortunately, even if one side's making it up, I feel like you have to let all that information come out.
It's a tricky situation.
Slippery slope.
Slippery slope. And I am fading.
You want to, real quick before you leave, go over just the election. We have to talk about that.
Do we? Do we really?
Go to the one where it's the election polls.
A new polling tells us Biden does have the opportunity for a statement map-changing win. That is not to say there is no path to re-election for the president, but he needs overwhelming election day turnout in a half dozen states or so. Maybe more. Let's look at some of our latest polling, and let's use the 2016 map to do it, because brand new CNN polling out overnight in some of the key battlegrounds. This one here, look at Arizona. Joe Biden with a 4-point lead in Arizona. That is close. If Joe Biden can win this state, that might be a game-over statement.
You can see what they were on the left. So I think if he moves this, you'll see what Hillary had versus Trump. Not in 2 days before the election, but what actually happened on election day.
Okay.
I would love to know what were the numbers 2 days before the election to compare apples to apples, but they keep moving these charts around so you can kind of see where things fell.
Change the Sun Belt states, but look, this one is very close. Joe Biden with a lead. He'd love to turn that state competitive to the end. Let's move to the east here and look at our new CNN polling. Again, one of the states that could decide.
When I always see this guy with his TV and he's like whipping stuff around and stuff.
For.
Yeah, but I always think to myself, what software is this that he's using? Did he hire some coder to make this just for him? Because it seems to work really well.
Yeah.
Right? He's never like pressing the TV 10 times to try to get it to do something.
I mean, he didn't do anything. It's like CNN.
Okay, but my point is like, I don't know. I haven't seen other maps that work this well. I'm interested in the technology. Like, how do they make it so smooth?
Not at all, and that actually we expect to count its votes quickly. On Election Day, North Carolina, Joe Biden with a 6-point lead in North Carolina. If that holds up, that would block the president. He needs North Carolina's electoral votes to win re-election. Joe Biden with a lead.
What I'm looking at as he's talking is just the difference in percentages. Because he is saying that Trump is going to lose all of these swing states. Really, it seems pretty easily. I know 5 to 6% doesn't feel like a big number, but
you can talk over it, and we don't need to hear him, do we?
I mean, here he's got. I mean, look at that number. Seems like Trump's definitely not going to win Michigan. I just wanted to show this so that it was documented 2 days before to see what actually happens. Because if Trump wins any of these states, like, again, could the media be that wrong on the polling? Part of me says yes. Part of me says, in 4 years, did we really learn what went wrong? I mean, I remember, I think we were filming Clay Cook's tutorial during the last election. And I remember staying up all that week. Every night, they were like, all the media was just, how did we get this wrong? Our polls were so far off. And I want to think now they've adjusted, like, part of me thinks they've adjusted so much that Trump really is going to get destroyed in this election. But then part of me thinks, like, maybe Trump voters now are definitely not going to say they're voting for Trump. Like last time, people said, I'm not voting for Trump to some degree, but they didn't know. Trump's this crazy TV star. But now, everyone, half the country hates Trump. I feel like if you're a Trump supporter now, you're definitely not going to say, yeah, I'm voting for Trump. A large percentage of them. You're either going to go out with your flags or you're going to just be like, I'm not going to tell you who I'm voting. So there's going to be a huge silent number of people voting for Trump. But you look at all these swing states here, and I don't know. It just seems like they're saying Biden's going to win all of these. I don't know. Do you have a take on what does your gut tell you who's going to win this election?
I felt a few weeks ago like Biden's definitely going to win. But as I talk to more and more people, like you said, I think there's just a lot of closet Trump fans. And I don't even know if they're Trump fans. They just hate Democrats so much.
Yeah.
And
the whole Republican Party's like that. They were all anti-never Trumpers. And now they're letting him do whatever he wants.
I've lost so much respect for the Republican Party for that reason. You know, I grew up and I always thought the Republican Party was the party of morals and family values and stuff. And then we bring some guy in that cheats on his pregnant wives with porn stars and pays them off, and it's totally fine, like not a big deal anymore. It's crazy.
Or, you know, Republicans were always like, we want to spend less on the government. Small government, let's cut taxes, less spending, have the states and the local people, you know. And then you look at Trump, and he's made the government bigger and spent more money than anyone before. And you're like, well, that's not a conservative policy either.
Yeah, but no one's calling him out for it, and so it just, I don't know. It doesn't feel like the same Republican Party to me.
The last video was the election betting odds. This is Stossel.
I wouldn't count on that. The Economist just gives Trump a 5% chance. Nate Silver's 538, which came closest to predicting Trump's last win, gives him just a 12% chance. Biden gets 87%. Come on, man. But wait, the most reliable predictors, people who bet on politics, people who put their own money where their mouths are, they give Trump a much better chance, 35%. That's according to electionbettingodds.com, a website we created that tracks betting sites around the world. That looks like a giant lead for Biden, but it's really not. 35% means Trump is likely to win a third of the time. And the bettors were wrong last election.
Let's build a better tomorrow for our beloved children.
Tuesday before Election Day, Hillary was at 75%. On election night, the betting began reversing before 9 p.m. While on TV, they were still saying things like,
Hillary Clinton has taken the lead. She has 68 electoral votes.
Has a greater chance of getting into office than Donald Trump. It looks like Donald Trump is more likely than not to lose.
Only hours after the betting had switched did they finally realize
Donald Trump wins the presidency. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I remember that night. That was so crazy. Like, oh my gosh, a freaking reality star is our president.
Did you watch that with anybody?
I don't remember.
I mean, I had a house party, and we had a girl in law school who was a hardcore Republican, and we had another friend of ours who was a huge Democrat, and like they started like fighting in my house, and I was like, this is insane. Like, I was shocked at what came out of people's mouths. I've never seen so much anger and just saying vile stuff to other people. And I was like, this is not it. And that's what worries me about being here, is you don't have to have 50% of the people at your party to be one side or the other. All it takes is a few people to be really, really pissed off. And suddenly, like, the vibe can get negative really quickly.
I think we all just have to sit back and remember that whoever is president almost has no effect on your life whatsoever. Like, maybe Trump, we all have to admit, I bet everyone in the United States watching this, Trump lowered your taxes. Like, you probably paid less in taxes than you have in a while because of his tax cuts. That's a good thing, you could argue. You could also argue that maybe the fact that his budget is so out of control, maybe, you know, the dollar is going to crash sooner, and, you know, maybe we're going to go into some crazy world depression or United States depression sooner because of his policies. I don't know, but for the most part, day in and day out, I think we think that it really affects our lives, but it doesn't. And
we had dinner with a guy last night who was like, I don't follow politics at all.
Yeah.
And he's like, at the end of the day, like, the last 16 years of my life, I don't know. I mean, he knows who the president is, obviously, but he's like, I don't really know what their policies are. I don't know what they're doing. I'm just focused on my business and, like, making the right decisions for my family. And I was like, man, it's encouraging to be reminded of that. But if you're a marginalized group who is affected, I mean, if you can't have an abortion legally in the United States, like, for you and I, that kind of feels like an issue that may not affect us. But if you're somebody who, you know, you get pregnant at 16 or 25 and you can't afford to have a kid, and now legally you can't have an abortion, like, there are many examples like this. Abortion is just the one that is easy to talk about because it's such a polarizing thing.
Yeah.
There's so many issues like that where you can't get health care is another big one, you know. If you can afford health care or you have a job that provides health care, it's probably not going to make that big of a difference, But if you are self-employed or underemployed and you have to pay out of pocket, the changes in healthcare can make a big difference, I know when Obamacare was passed, a lot of people's, my insurance went up.
It doubled. It doubled for everybody.
On one hand, I was able to get insurance, but then as the years went on, my insurance kept going up and up and up significantly.
Yeah. So if you put it that way, when Obama was in office, our expenses went up, and when Trump was in office, it got cheaper.
The one thing that Trump, I hate even sticking up for him, but Trump has not sent us into a real war.
Yeah?
Like, we are not sending soldiers anywhere to fight a real war like the last couple presidents we've had. You could say Obama, we went to war with the ISIS and Syria and that whole thing. And Afghanistan was still going on. You had George Bush, who sent us into wars. You had Bill Clinton, who sent us into, Gulf War and all of that. We were in the Cold War with Reagan. Like, every president has had Bush Sr., that was Desert Storm. Like, every one of them have sent us into massive wars. You might be able to argue that Trump's doing a different kind of war with the tariffs and stuff, but he's pulled soldiers back. And, like, everyone was worried he's going to hit that nuclear button and go to nuclear war. And that didn't happen, And so,
maybe
making
I
little
should vote
statements.
for Trump.
If Biden wins, the other crazy thing is I was looking up at presidents' ages. Only Ronald Reagan left office at 77 years old. He is the oldest president we've ever had. Biden will be 77 when he enters into office. I don't know if he'll be, by day, the oldest president, but he will if he serves his term. And then Trump, 74 years old right now, he will be 78 if he completes his second term. And it goes back to, me thinking, do we need people in their mid to late 70s running? They just seem so out of touch. This doesn't seem like a good thing.
No, I don't know. I'm not that offended by
One
that.
story coming out of this is that 60 million people have already voted in America. We're going to have, I think, the highest turnout of votes ever.
And you know how on Tuesday, the votes are coming in live and everybody's watching and counting everything. Are they releasing the numbers of mail-in votes so far?
I don't know how all that's going to work.
Because I haven't heard anything. So far, Biden's winning. It doesn't seem like
I
they're
don't think they
releasing
can
it.
count and release them. Maybe
Why?
they can't be opened until Election Day.
Oh, you think that's what's going on?
I don't know. There's so many crazy things going on. I read last election, 25% of New York voters, their ballots were excused because they weren't properly done.
25%?
It was a huge number, just dismissed.
Gosh.
It's like you have to have the witness signature, which I'm like, who's even verifying that? Who cares? You can't audit that. You have to do everything by the book and everything. It just seems unlikely. But do you have a prediction? If we don't go live again until Tuesday or maybe even afterwards, maybe we go late at night. I don't know what we're going to do yet. But who do you think is going to win the election?
Biden.
I think Biden too. And
well, that's not as fun.
If Biden doesn't win and Trump actually does win, I know people are going to say the Supreme Court suppressed. There's going to be a shit show, I think, either way. I think we're entering into the worst couple months of this whole year. If Biden does not win and Trump does win, and you look at the media, and I feel like if you're even unbiased, the media is clear, every news channel is pulling for Biden to win, right? That's a safe...
Except for Fox.
Except for Fox, but I would imagine if you add up all the viewership and all the platforms and you're looking at what Twitter's doing and you just put all of that out there, it feels like, how could Biden possibly lose this election with this sort of media?
I felt like that the last time, though.
The last time, though, that was different was that the media showed almost all of Trump's rallies.
Because he was so crazy.
It was free publicity. And he had no policy. He had nothing to stand on. And so it wasn't like, hey, here's this evil person. Here's this guy we don't want to win. But now Trump is, turn on any channel right now. You're going to hear Trump is responsible for 700 deaths at his rallies. He is responsible for more deaths of American citizens than anyone in the history of America. You're hearing stuff like that every second. And so I just wonder if Trump wins, the two thoughts I had was, what in the world does that prove about our media? Like, they couldn't get their candidate to win. And then the other kind of sick view I had was, does that show that democracy is free and alive because somehow the underdog still won? I don't know that I want to think that way either, because I don't know that I want to think that, like, Trump equals democracy. But if he somehow does win in this environment, like, I mean, those polls that just showed 9% chance of winning, it also goes to show that our polls are total garbage. Like, never, ever should they be believed again. But there's so many things that are going to come out of this.
Well, we got a couple more super chats here to catch up on. Mike Kidwell says, censorship in any form is bad. And Steve Robertson says, fair point on curation. This is what we were talking about earlier. I probably used the wrong term. I want fact-checked information. By the way, what lens is that on the Nikon on the table? Well, you just unboxed this before we went live. I haven't even seen this yet. This is a Canon R5.
That's the smallest 70 to 200 2.8 I've ever seen.
Oh, locked. Interesting. Yeah, so we've getting some new cameras recently. We've got the Sony a7 III, which I purchased and I am in love with. And I've been hearing some pretty good things about this camera as well. And if only, you know, this camera didn't have a record limit and didn't overheat, this might be the ultimate camera.
Oh, this is the one that overheats, the people are saying?
Yeah. Which is too bad, but I'm excited to shoot with this.
But for the time being, it is a prop, a set prop.
Yes. A very, very expensive set prop. All right, guys, thank you for watching. That wraps up this video. I don't know that we've decided yet if we're going to be doing a
live chat
during the election. We'll think about it.
If we did, it would have to be like 7 o'clock. We can't go live at 9 if the last election people felt like they started to know at 9 or 10 o'clock who won. I feel like you want the lead up, right? Or do we just...
Yeah, maybe it's just a bad decision. I don't know. We'll talk about it. And we will see you guys soon.